Hey there, this is R A Manard for Monks of the Way, and this is the weekly Truth Talk. And I'd like to go ahead and mention the 12-step program today. And it's from monk perspective, so it may be a little different than the way you've heard people talk about it. First, let's talk about the 12 steps. Now, they are not simply what they are, they have changed over the years. It used to be all of them said God, 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 God all over it. And most of them have changed it to higher power, as you understand it, kind of thing, to make it a little less obviously religious. People had an issue with that, and rightfully so. And they used to make it in the present tense. We admit that we are powerless, etc., etc. And they've put it in the past tense mostly now. We admitted we were powerless, as an example. And this generally works for them because they agree to these 12 steps and talk about them in the past as if it's a covenant that they've made, an agreement, an agreement that they can't break, and and that's okay. Let's go through the 12. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Number 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Number 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Wow, still the word God and still the sexist him in there. Number 4, sorry, couldn't help myself. It seemed appropriate to mention. Number 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Number 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Number 6, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Number 7, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Number 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Number 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Number 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Number 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will and for us, and the power to carry that out. Number 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Now, there's AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and then there's another group for people that deal with the alcoholics. They have some relationship, family, mate relationship, whatever their relationship might be. And they have these 12 steps, and they're kind of rewritten also to cater to those people. But they keep the way these things are conceived the same. And I'm going to say that I'm not personally a big fan of the way this is. However, I don't think we should throw it out because we have problems with it. We should, like I say, be disciplined and measured and take a look at things, factually debate things. So, number 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Now, Obviously, if a person is powerless, then there's nothing they could do. But let's look at that. How do you know you're powerless? How do you know you were powerless in the past? Let's say you did something bad and you knew you shouldn't, but you did it anyway. You, for all intent and purpose, couldn't help yourself. That's still how you look at it. But could you have helped yourself? Was there the possibility that you had the power but didn't utilize it? Well, how would you know now, right? We can't know that we were powerless in the past, but really it's the present tense that we should be dealing with in the now. Are you powerless? A person might feel like they're powerless over a compulsion they have, an urge. And this urge can feel like it is irresistible, that there's nothing they can do. But does that mean it's true? It might not, right? Maybe every single time they would, in that present moment, um, not be able to control themselves, not have the discipline, not have the ability to control themselves, not even be measured about it. I think it's far more healthy to be self-reliant and realize that you have the power to do things you can't even possibly imagine. But you have to realize it. Rather than you're powerless and that's it. Just admitting that you're powerless. Now, I want to mention that there are areas where you are what you are, you can do what you can do, and that's it. Um, and self-control is hard to have. Let's take a look at something in the sutta here. Suttas, a different sutta. How about we look at the 8th sutta of Digha Nikaya? Now, here it's got a dialogue between Buddha and a person there on self-mortification. Basically denying the self or harming the self and hoping to get some greater ability or clarification from this. And there are lots of different practices of ascetics. And I think we see in these 12 steps that someone was trying to bring Buddhism into a religious context. And you can do that, although it's definitely something different than the Buddhist concept, even though they try to bring it there. Most of the Buddhist concept is there. I tell people 2 out of 3 parts, but we could get to that probably in a larger explanation. The Buddha claims that insight and self-control, self-mastery, are things that to the monk are harder, much harder than merely physical practices of ascetics, starving, painful poses, chanting forever, whatever chant, and even people who are critics can pretty much easily name these things as they are. The Buddha states that the self-mortification is an actual hindrance to spiritual development, and it turns the mind from more essential matters. And I guess I want to mention that if we look at the Eightfold Path, I think we're going to see them in these different in the 12 steps mirrored. Let's continue to 2. I spent too long on 1 probably. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Now, something greater than ourselves could help us. And they're putting God in here, but in the Buddhist concept, we're putting the universe there, the way of things, the way. And so there's certainly a parallel there. And I think anybody who's at all truthful about reality will believe there's power greater than themselves. And you can see they say this power could restore us to sanity in the Buddhist concept that uh, learning the truth can help us, not necessarily restore, because that means you were sane before. It means you had it before. And I think that's certainly arguable that it should be phrased that way, even for an alcoholic. Number 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. So, turning their will over is actually a mirror, I would say, but not to a God, to the way of things, the truth, universal truth. A monk certainly does this. They are beholden to universal truths, as they understand them, of course. And the cultivation of their practice in life enriches them and brings them uh, joy. They get to experience more love. They remove some suffering and confusion. Basically, the three things that I talk about often, which would be sadness, anger, and fear. These three things we remove as we can. Number 4. Well, number 3, I should mention, there's an externalizing and an internalizing, and we're not really turning ourselves over to some just outside, but inside as a monk. We are self-reliant, and as much as we are beholden to the universe, it's about inside, not outside. Whereas you could externalize that and say it's about outside, and then I'm just the follower. And we want to be in touch with universal truth, certainly, and live within it. So there is a parallel. Number 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Introspection. Enough said there, probably, right? Number 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Well, from the Buddhist perspective, of course, they wouldn't be admitting it to a God. They would be admitting it to themselves, and they certainly would be admitting it to someone else, because they're going to have these close friendships within their group where they're going to share these things. They have the 3 refuges. They have uh, the 3 jewels, they're called sometimes. There's the truth, the teaching, and the community. And certainly within the community you should have friends that are close. And close friendship is certainly one of the greatest blessings of life. Number 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. Now, once again, this is outside, and we're, as monks, talking about inside. That we're ready to ourselves remove these character defects, these things that are not consistent with universal truth. These things that are not consistent with who we want to be and what we want to do. Truthfully, if we understand correctly. Now, number 7, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Once again, that's externalized, like someone is going to do that to us, and we're doing it for ourselves clearly within the Buddhist perspective. Certainly there's this interaction with the universe, that you work with the universe and the universe works with you. and they have that externalized as a God concept. And, you can't factually debate this with people that are of that persuasion, that externalized persuasion. Uh, I've many times talked with them about it. They say things like, God built this house, and you ask them, well, where'd you get the money to do that? Well, I worked for it. I make bricks. Okay, so did God make the bricks? So you got a free paycheck? No. Okay, then mysteriously lumber formed itself on your construction site. No, we bought the lumber with the money you made working. Yeah, okay. And you witnessed God hammering the nails? No. Pouring the foundation? No. Um, what part of this did God do that makes you think that He built this house? And they're like, well, I feel that he or she gave me the confidence, blah blah blah. Uh, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I mean continuing, continuing, continuing. And they have this perspective, and okay, but they know full well it's not a literal thing. It's not an actual thing. It's a belief or a metaphor, but not reality. In reality, they built that house. Now they can dedicate it to whatever they so choose. And whatever they choose to believe, because it does please them, they can attribute whatever to that belief. That belief is what made it possible. And I believe that's what they're saying. And they many times can verbalize that, and many times they can't. But let's continue here. Um, Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Well, your introspection from the monk's point of view, you should not necessarily make a list. Certainly, I don't know that making a list is the best thing to do, but certainly it's within a practice that doesn't seem harmful, right? To make a list of the persons you had harmed because you were wrongful and be willing to make amends to them. You're sorry you did it. You want to make it right. Certainly nothing wrong with that. Number 9, made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when it would injure them or others. So you're not going to continue to do harm to try to make something right, basically. Number 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So, you know what? You realize you're going down the wrong path or you're doing something wrong. You just stop and you try to make it right then. You stop doing it. You correct the behavior. You, as an example, tell somebody a lie in conversation. Go, you know what? I lied about that. This is the truth. Very sorry. You know. And I've actually seen people mess that up and tell a lie to make the lie right. So they tell someone something's one way, a lie. They realize they shouldn't lie. They make a lie about why they lied, like they forgot or they misunderstood, when that's not true. So they're lying to make their lie right, and they feel like they've went ahead and corrected that situation when they've compounded it, really. Anyway, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Of course, like I've mentioned, a parallel to the monk perspective, of course, sought through prayer and meditation. Meditation would be the operative thing there for monks. And some monks, some Buddhist persuasions, not necessarily the teachings of Buddha, of course, but Buddhist persuasions, Buddha-like practice, that means Buddhist, um, to improve their conscious contact with the universe, to be more aware, basically. And prayer, some of them, like I say, do pray. Most famously to they believe aspects of Buddha, like a particular part of Buddha, like a personification of a particular aspect, and or to Buddha himself. And certainly when I talk about prayer, I say I'm not saying you shouldn't pray, but I don't advise you ever ask for anything. And they're saying they would ask for knowledge of the will of, from the monk perspective, the universe, and the power to carry that out. Now they're externalizing it like something outside them gives them the power, and from the monk perspective, it's inside. Number 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in our affairs. I don't know. There should be a sutta that pertains somewhat to this. There we go. Dhammapada 12.159. One should do what one teaches others to do. So one should do themselves what a person teaches other people to do if that person would train other people. Now, that person should be well controlled themselves, and difficult, of course, is self-control, discipline. Discipline and self-control are very difficult. Now, they're saying, having had a spiritual awakening, but they're saying they should meditate. So, meditation, a spiritual awakening, certainly the one lends itself to the other. And as a result of these steps, they're trying to get in tune with the way of things, and they're trying to cultivate what they find. And then they're bringing that message to other people that suffer the same thing that they do. When they are able to do it, they are sharing what they're able to do with others. And to practice these principles in our affairs, of course, they're cultivating it, they're working it, they're practicing it. And now that I've gone through the 12, I want to mention that when I ask people of these 12-step programs about this, it's pretty much the same as building the house. They're saying they want something outside themselves to restore them to sanity, to help them understand, to remove character defects. But they're doing the work themselves. They're, as much as they're trying to be in tune with the way of things, they certainly are doing everything themselves and becoming self-reliant. They are going to these meetings and developing this community with these people that have, of a like mind, the same interests, the same issues, like any community, well, like most communities, let's say. And they're developing these close friendships with these people. They even get a mentor within this group. So they're certainly doing things in that way. And they're not going to bars anymore. They're trying to avoid, making the same mistakes that they've made once they realize they've made mistakes. Trying to, once again, get in tune with things. They're not hanging out with their drinking buddies that drink all the time, that can't be supportive of what they're doing, but always seeking because they intend to or not to undermine their progress. And a lot could be said about friendships here, but we'll leave what's self-evident to itself there. And they're going to these meetings, they're working their program, the steps. They're working a process of getting in touch with what's true, cultivating in their lives, and getting good results, and sharing the good results they get with others that have not yet received those results. So, obviously, an easy thing to understand when you talk to these people about these things. They're removing their shortcomings. They're seeking to understand, they're seeking to change. They're getting in touch with the way of things. They're having meditation, they're having realizations. They're making change. Their views are changing. The way they understand things is changing. They're using what they understand in their lives to make sure that it works right. And they're refining their understanding of these universal truths. They choose to attribute this, like the house, once again, to their beliefs. That's okay. But let's be very clear about what they're actually doing in their lives. And people understand the universal truth of this. It's very interesting to me that in holy works, there are common things that people attribute to those holy works that aren't in there at all, because they just seem to be so self-evident and true, their mind just connects it with that work. But it's not there. One of these things that famously in the Bible that most Christians believe is in there is that God helps those that help themselves. Actually, the opposite is in there many times. So it's interesting, but people do universally pretty much understand that you have to help yourself. And that's the message I would want to put with these 12 steps, is no matter what's your belief system, that you're going to need to do it. Nobody's going to do it for you. You want to cultivate compassion, kindness. You want to stop coming back to the material world for the sensation of it, because it is a place of suffering. It's never not going to be a place of suffering. And all people suffer in one way or another. So it is a place of suffering. It is not a place to keep coming back to. And you can break yourself of it. You can have a separating of the ways between you and this place of suffering you keep coming back to, for once again the more intense sensation of it. You still have sensation in the next land, and I say that, but even if you don't believe there is a next land, there's a here and a now. Certainly you want to suffer less. You want to have less fear, less anger, less sadness. You don't enjoy those things, and if you do, you got something to work on, obvious there. And certainly some people do find themselves getting in these situations, even as monks, where they start to enjoy sadness. They attribute it to being compassionate, of course, but then they enjoy the sadness part of it. That somehow proves that the more they suffer, the more it proves they're better people, or more in tune with things. And that is not the case. The more sad, the more angry, upset about it, basically, the more fearful, the more afraid of the bad things. So I would caution against that. So these have been 12 steps, and I'm going to take a look now and see. No, there have been no questions. Now, I don't know when you're seeing this, but if you have questions about it, certainly let me know. I'm going to have one of these talks for each week. of the year. And then, of course, in the future, I'll have other things too, like a Sit With Me Saturday about meditation. And of course, that's something I'll share here, but also on a particular meditation group on Facebook. And these things can be found on Facebook and on YouTube on a channel. So if you're not sure where you could get more of these, those are places you could look. Monks of the Way or my name would probably pull those things up in a search engine on the internet, on the World Wide Web, whatever you'd want to call it. So in conclusion, I want to say that there are certainly parallels here, and we're talking about the same thing. And I say that many times in a religious context, that these religions are by and large mostly trying to communicate the same things that Buddha was trying to communicate. And before Buddha, very little of it was that way. But after Buddha, they changed the way they saw things. And now, pretty much across the board, religions are teaching the teachings of Buddha one way or another, mostly. And then there's other stuff, of course, included. I want to thank you for having a listen today. I wish for you that truth will remove delusion in your life the way light removes darkness. And I wish all the best things in life for you. Well, once again, thank you for having a listen.